A young ensign at NAS San Diego stood on the tarmac watching the wreckage burn. October 1942, the twisted aluminum that used to be an F4U Corsair scattered across the runway like shrapnel. The pilot hadn't survived. He'd been the third one that month. The aircraft was the 15th Corsair delivered to VF-12. It had flown exactly 9 times before killing him. The other pilots gathered in small groups speaking in low voices. They'd stopped counting the crashes. The long-nosed fighter with the bent wings was supposed to be the Navy's newest weapon, the fastest carrier fighter ever built, over 400 miles per hour in level flight. But young pilots kept dying in it, not from enemy fire, from trying to land. The Navy brass looked at the smoking wreckage and the casualty reports piling up on their desks and made a decision. This fighter was too dangerous for carriers. They had a name for it now, the Ensign Eliminator. So they gave it to the Marines. The Marines didn't care if it was dangerous. They needed something that could kill Zeros. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and hit subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this. The Vought F4U Corsair was born from a simple requirement in 1938. The Navy wanted the fastest fighter possible. Rex Beisel led the design team at Chance Vought. His instructions were clear. Build the smallest airframe around the most powerful engine available. Maximum speed. Minimum drag. Beisel chose the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, a massive 18-cylinder radial engine producing 2,000 horsepower, the biggest engine ever mounted in a single-seat fighter. It drove a propeller over 13 feet in diameter. The prototype XF4U first flew on May 29, 1940. Test pilot Lyman Bullard pushed it hard. On October 1, 1940, he hit 404 miles per hour in level flight. First American single-engine fighter to exceed 400. The Navy ordered 584 aircraft on June 30, 1941. Then the problems emerged. The original design mounted guns in the nose and wings. Lessons from Europe showed this armament was insufficient. The Navy wanted 6 50 caliber machine guns, all in the wings. Moving the guns displaced the wing fuel tanks. Engineers installed a 237-gallon fuel tank in the forward fuselage ahead of the cockpit. This forced the cockpit back 32 inches. Now the wing blocked the pilot's view during landing. Completely blocked it. The massive propeller created another problem. It needed clearance from the ground. A straight wing would have required landing gear so tall it would collapse on carrier decks. Beisel's solution was the inverted gull wing. The wings bent downward from the fuselage then angled back up. This allowed shorter landing gear while keeping the propeller away from the deck. It gave the Corsair its distinctive silhouette, but it created a beast that didn't want to land on carriers. The landing gear was stiff. It bounced on touchdowns, sending the aircraft careening left or right with no warning. One wing stalled before the other at low speed, causing snap rolls that killed pilots. The long nose made it impossible to see the carrier deck during final approach. Pilots were landing blind at 90 miles per hour on a moving platform the size of a postage stamp. At one training base, the crashes came so fast they nicknamed the Corsair the Ensign Eliminator. Young pilots died before they ever saw combat. The Navy ran the numbers. Too many aircraft destroyed. Too many pilots killed. Too dangerous for carrier operations. In February 1943, they made it official. The Corsair was unsuitable for carriers. Send them to the Marines. Land-based duty. No carriers required. The first Marine Corsair squadron was VMF 124. They arrived at Henderson Field, Guadalcanal on February 12, 1943. 12 aircraft. Fresh from the States. The Marines had logged an average of 25 hours each in this new fighter. Now they were going into combat. Major William Guise led the squadron. He sat in the cockpit waiting for the signal to taxi. The long nose stretched ahead of him, blocking everything. He couldn't see the taxiway. Couldn't see the aircraft ahead. He rolled his head out the side of the canopy, looking for the ground crew's hand signals. The Corsair felt different from the Wildcat. Heavier. More powerful. The massive R2800 rumbled in front of him. The bent-wing sledgehammer. That's what the mechanics called it. A flying battering ram. February 14, 1943. Valentine's Day. VMF-124 launched with P-40s and P-38s to escort B-24 Liberators on a raid against Kahili airfield. The bombers needed protection. Kahili was a major Japanese base, heavily defended. The formation crossed the water. Guadalcanal fell behind. Ahead lay Bougainville. The bombers were at 18,000 feet. The fighters spread out around them, scanning constantly for enemy aircraft. They came from above. Japanese Zeros dropping out of the sun, diving fast. The radio erupted with calls. Bandits high 6 o'clock. The formation scattered. First Lieutenant Gordon Lyon rolled his Corsair hard. A Zero flashed past. Lyon pulled tight, turning after it. The Corsair's controls were heavy at high speed. He hauled back on the stick. The aircraft responded, sluggish but powerful, like a truck trying to dance. The Zero was turning inside him. Tighter radius. Lyon couldn't match it. The Japanese aircraft was a paper samurai. Fragile. Built for agility. It could turn on a dime. The Corsair was the sledgehammer. 8 tons of aluminum and fury. Lyon reversed. Used the Corsair's speed. WWII then pulled up hard, climbing on raw power. The Zero tried to follow. Lyon had more horsepower. More speed. He climbed away. The Zero fell behind, losing the energy fight. Lyon rolled over, came back down. The Zero was turning, trying to get angles. Lyon dove straight at it, neither pilot giving way. The closing speed was insane, over 600 miles per hour combined. They collided midair. The Corsair's wing struck the Zero. Both aircraft disintegrated. Lyon and the Japanese pilot fell into the sea. First confirmed kill credited to a Corsair. Both pilots dead. The battle spread across 50 miles of sky. American and Japanese fighters mixed in a chaotic melee. Radio calls overlapped. Screaming. Warnings. Explosions. No one could coordinate. The Americans lost 4 P-38s, 2 P-40s, 2 Corsairs including Lyon, 2 B-24 bombers. The Japanese lost perhaps 4 Zeros. The fiasco became known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. VMF-124 landed back at Henderson Field with holes in their aircraft and dead friends. The Corsair was fast, but that didn't guarantee survival. Major Guys gathered his pilots in the operations tent. They reviewed what happened, what worked, what didn't. The Corsair could dive faster than the Zero. It could climb better with that massive R-2800 clawing at the air. It was more heavily built. Japanese aircraft had no armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks. A few hits from 50 caliber guns would shred them, but the Zero could turn. At low speed it danced. American pilots had to fight a different fight. Boom and zoom. Energy tactics. Use altitude and speed. Never slow down. Never try to turn with a Zero at 200 miles per hour. Over the next weeks, VMF-124 refined their tactics. They learned the bent-wing sledgehammer strengths. Speed above 300 miles per hour, the Corsair outperformed everything. The Zero couldn't catch it in a dive, couldn't follow it in a climb. The Corsair pilots learned to attack from altitude, dive on the target, fire a burst, pull up, climb back to altitude. If a Zero got on your tail, you dove. The Zero couldn't follow a terminal velocity dive. The Corsair could hit 450 miles per hour straight down. The Zero's airframe couldn't handle it. The aircraft would come apart in the air. Second Lieutenant Kenneth Walsh had joined VMF-124 before they deployed. He was 26 years old. He'd enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1933 as a private. Worked his way up through the enlisted ranks as a mechanic and radioman. Earned his wings in 1936 while still a private. By 1943, he was a second lieutenant and one of the most experienced pilots in the squadron. April 1, 1943. Walsh was finishing a combat air patrol when he spotted Japanese aircraft below. 3 miles down. Zeros escorting bombers toward Guadalcanal. Walsh didn't radio for permission. He rolled the Corsair inverted and shoved the stick forward. The dive was vertical. The altimeter unwound like a broken clock. 20,000 feet. 18. 16. The Corsair screamed. Wind howled through the gun ports. The airframe shuddered. Walsh's seat straps cut into his shoulders. The engine roar filled his skull. His ears popped from the pressure change. The controls were getting stiff. Compressibility. The point where the plane stops listening to the pilot. Walsh eased back slightly on the stick. The nose came up a fraction. The buffeting stopped. He was diving at the edge of control. The Zero grew in his gun sight from a speck to a shape to an aircraft. He could see the dark green camouflage. The red circles on the wings. The Japanese pilot never looked up. Focused on the bombers ahead. Hunting. He had no idea death was falling on him at 400 miles per hour. Walsh's finger found the trigger at 500 yards. Too far for most pilots with wing-mounted guns. But the Corsair's 650s were all clustered tight in the wings. The convergence pattern was tighter than other fighters. Walsh squeezed. The Corsair shuddered like it hit a wall. Smoke streamed back over the canopy. A solid stream of tracers reached down like a burning spear. The .50 caliber rounds walked up the Zero's fuselage. Engine cowling. Canopy. Wings. The Zero didn't explode. It disintegrated. 1 second a terrifying war machine. Next second burning confetti tumbling through the sky. Pieces spinning. The pilot never had time to bail out. Walsh flew through the debris field. Metal fragments clattered against his wings like hail. The heat from the fireball flashed against his windscreen. He pulled out at 8,000 feet. The G-forces crushed him into his seat. His vision grayed at the edges. Blood drained from his head. He groaned. Fought the blackout. 5 seconds of crushing pressure. The gray cleared. He checked his 6. He checked his instruments. All green. He looked down. The Zero was a black smear on the jungle canopy. 1 down. Walsh scanned for more targets. 2 more Zeros turned toward him. He selected one. Dove on it from above. Got behind it. The Japanese pilot saw him and tried to escape. Tried to turn. Walsh followed. The Corsair was faster. He closed the distance. Fired. The stream of lead hammered into the Zero's engine. The cowling shattered. Fuel sprayed. The aircraft caught fire. The pilot bailed out. His parachute opened. The burning Zero spun down, trailing black smoke. Walsh spotted another target. A Zero flying low, trying to strafe American positions on the ground. Walsh rolled over and dove. Lined up behind him. The Japanese pilot was focused on his target. Never saw Walsh coming. Walsh fired from 300 yards. The 650s roared. The Zero's tail section separated. The aircraft snapped into a violent spin. Hit the jungle and exploded. 3 kills in 1 mission. Walsh landed at Henderson Field with his aircraft intact. His hands were still shaking from adrenaline. The ground crew swarmed the Corsair. They found spent shell casings in the cockpit. Gun barrels hot enough to burn skin. Not a single bullet hole in Walsh's aircraft. 3 victories. May 13, 1943. Walsh was leading a flight when they intercepted Japanese aircraft over the Russell Islands. The engagement was fast and violent. Walsh shot down 2 more Zeros in quick succession. 5 total victories. He was the first Corsair ace. First pilot to achieve 5 kills flying the bent-wing fighter. The Corsair was proving itself. Durable. Deadly. But it still couldn't land on carriers. The Navy continued sending them to Marine squadrons operating from land bases. By mid-1943, dozens of Marine Corsair squadrons were scattered across the Pacific. They flew escort missions, fighter sweeps, ground attack. The Corsair's 650 caliber guns could shred Japanese aircraft. They could also devastate ground targets, barges, trucks, buildings, supply dumps. The bent-wing sledgehammer became a precision instrument in skilled hands. August 15, 1943. Walsh was a first lieutenant and division leader. His division of 4 Corsairs was on patrol over Vella La Vella when they spotted Japanese aircraft inbound. Dive bombers and fighters heading for American forces on the ground. Walsh counted the enemy formation. 24 aircraft. His division had 4. 6-1 odds. Walsh didn't hesitate. He rolled into the attack and called his wingmen to follow. They dove into the Japanese formation from above, catching them by surprise. Walsh fired on a Val dive bomber. The 50 caliber rounds tore through the lightly armored bomber like paper. It caught fire and went down trailing smoke. Walsh pulled up hard. Another Val ahead. He fired. Second bomber destroyed. Japanese fighters reacted. Zeros swarmed toward the 4 Corsairs. Walsh's aircraft shuddered. 20mm cannon rounds slammed into his starboard wing. One round punctured the fuel tank. Gasoline sprayed into the slipstream. Walsh yanked the stick. Violent evasive maneuvers. A Zero followed firing. Walsh dove for a cloud. Entered it blind. Inside the cloud his gyroscope tumbled. Vertigo hit hard. He couldn't tell up from down. The world spun. Walsh forced himself to focus on the instruments. Needleball airspeed. He fought the controls. The Corsair was inverted. In a 43-degree dive, Walsh exited the cloud upside down, looking at the crater of an extinct volcano. The island of Kolumbangara rushed up at him. Green jungle filling his windscreen. He rolled the aircraft right side up, pulled back on the stick with both hands. The wings groaned under G-forces. Walsh's vision grayed. He was pulling 6GS, 7. On the edge of blackout. The Corsair's nose came up. Inch by inch. The jungle was close enough to see individual trees. He skimmed over the crater rim with feet to spare. Walsh flew home low and fast. His Corsair was shot full of holes. Fuel streaming from the wing. The mechanics declared it a write-off. Walsh had shot down 3 Japanese aircraft. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross. 2 weeks later, August 30th, 1943, Walsh was leading an escort mission. His flight of Corsairs was protecting bombers heading for Kahili. During the flight, Walsh's engine developed problems. Rough running. Loss of power. He couldn't maintain formation speed. Walsh broke off. Flew to Munda, an American base captured weeks earlier. He landed the damaged Corsair. Jumped out. Found another aircraft in the revetment. Engine warm. Fueled. Ready. He climbed in. Took off. Flew back to rejoin his flight over Kahili. He arrived alone. His flight was nowhere in sight. Below him he spotted Japanese aircraft. Lots of them. He counted approximately 50 Zeros. 50 enemy fighters circling like sharks protecting the base below. 1 Corsair. Walsh attacked. He dove on the formation from 20,000 feet. The Corsair built speed. 300 miles per hour. 350. 400. The airframe vibrated. He selected a target. A Zero at the edge of the formation. Fired. The Zero exploded in a ball of orange flame. Walsh pulled up hard. Climbed back toward the sun. The Japanese fighters realized they were under attack. They swarmed toward the lone Corsair. Walsh kept attacking. He had altitude. He had speed. He had 6 machine guns loaded with 2,400 rounds. He rolled over and dove again. Picked another Zero. Fired. The Japanese aircraft caught fire and spiraled down. Walsh pulled up. Climbed. The Zeros were climbing after him, but the Corsair climbed faster. He had the R-2800's 2,000 horsepower clawing at thin air. They couldn't catch him. Walsh dove a third time. Selected his target. A Zero trying to gain altitude. Walsh fired from above. The stream of 50 caliber rounds caught the Zero in the wing root. The wings separated. The Japanese plane snapped into a violent spin. 3 down. Walsh was in the zone. Time slowed down. His hands were steady on the stick. His breathing calm. He picked his 4th target. A Zero diving toward him head-on. Dangerous. The closing speed was over 600 miles per hour. Walsh didn't flinch. He fired first. The 650s created a wall of lead the Zero had to fly through. The Japanese pilot tried to break away. Too late. The rounds shredded his engine. The Zero trailed smoke and dove toward the water. Walsh pulled up. A Zero got behind him. Cannon fire tore into his Corsair. The engine coughed. Sputtered. Oil sprayed across the windscreen, blocking his view. The propeller slowed. Then stopped. Dead stick. Walsh glided toward the water off Vella La Vella. He had maybe 2 minutes before impact. He trimmed the aircraft for best glide. Found a clear patch of ocean. Ditched. The Corsair hit the water hard. The impact threw Walsh against his straps. Water rushed into the cockpit. He yanked the canopy release. Climbed out. The Corsair was sinking fast. Walsh pushed away from the wreckage. Floated in his Mae West. A patrol boat picked him up hours later. For more kills. Total score 9 for the mission. Walsh had single-handedly engaged 50 Japanese fighters. Shot down 4. Damaged others. Survived. February 8, 1944. Walsh received the Medal of Honor from President Roosevelt. The citation covered his actions on August 15 and August 30, 1943. Extraordinary heroism. Repeatedly diving into enemy formations despite overwhelming odds. Walsh became the first Corsair pilot to receive the nation's highest military honor. By summer 1943, the Marines had proven the Corsair's combat effectiveness. The aircraft dominated Japanese fighters when flown correctly, but the Navy still kept them off carriers. The landing problems remained unsolved. Poor visibility, bouncing landing gear, unpredictable stall characteristics. Young pilots were still dying in training accidents. The British figured it out. The Royal Navy received Corsairs in late 1943. They operated different carriers, smaller decks, different procedures. British pilots were used to landing aircraft with poor visibility. The Seafire had similar problems. British instructors developed a curved approach. Instead of flying straight toward the carrier, the pilot flew a long curve. This kept the landing signals officer visible until the last moment. The pilot could see the LSO's signals, react to them, time the approach correctly. British engineers made additional modifications. They adjusted the landing gear oleo struts, softened the valve settings. This reduced the bouncing on touchdown. They added a small wedge to the leading edge of the starboard wing, 6 inches long, 8 inches wide. This stall strip changed the airflow, made both wings stall simultaneously instead of one before the other. The snap roll problem disappeared. The modifications worked. British Corsairs began operating from Royal Navy carriers in late 1943. HMS Victorious, HMS Illustrious, HMS Formidable. They flew combat missions against the German battleship Tirpitz, against Japanese positions in the East Indies. The British proved the Corsair could operate from carriers. You just had to fix the problems the Americans had ignored. The U.S. Navy watched, tested the British modifications, made additional changes, raised the pilot's seat, improved the canopy for better visibility, added a taller tailwheel strut to improve the angle of attack during landing. By April 1944, the Navy cleared the Corsair for carrier operations, 7 years after the project started. But by then the Corsairs were Marine aircraft. The Marines owned the Corsair's combat reputation. The bent-wing fighter was a Marine fighter. The Navy had the Grumman F-6F Hellcat, slower than the Corsair but easier to land. The Hellcat filled Navy carrier squadrons. September 1943. Major Gregory Boyington took command of IMF 214, Marine Fighter Squadron 214, the Black Sheep Squadron. Boyington was 31 years old, a decade older than most of his pilots. They called him Pappy. He'd flown with the Flying Tigers in China before the war, claimed 6 kills there. Now he was back in the Marines flying Corsairs in the South Pacific. The 214 deployed to Espiritu Santo, then moved forward to Vella La Vella. They flew the bent-wing Sledgehammer. The squadron didn't have assigned aircraft. Pilots shared planes with other units. Before each mission, pilots jumped on a jeep, rode down the flight line. Plane captains signaled thumbs up or thumbs down for each aircraft. If the plane was ready, the pilot climbed in. If it was down, they moved to the next revetment. The Black Sheep flew their first combat mission September 16, 1943. During the first 2 weeks, they shot down 23 Japanese aircraft, lost 5 pilots. The pace was brutal. Missions every day, sometimes twice a day. Fighter sweeps over Japanese bases. Bomber escorts. Combat air patrol. Boyington was aggressive. He led the squadron on a fighter sweep over Kahili where 60 Japanese fighters were based. He wanted a fight. Got one. The Japanese launched their fighters. The formations met at 20,000 feet. The Corsairs dove on the climbing Zeros. The altitude advantage. The speed advantage. The Corsairs were birds of prey. The Zeros were climbing slowly, heavy with fuel. The Marines tore into them. 20 Japanese fighters went down. Not a single Corsair lost. October 4, 1943. Boynton was escorting dive bombers over Bougainville. Japanese Zeros intercepted. The sky filled with aircraft. Boynton picked his targets methodically. He was a surgeon with a machine gun. Within 1 minute he shot down 3 Zeros. 3 kills in 60 seconds. His guns were a buzzsaw. Each burst lasted 2 seconds. No wasted ammunition. First Zero took fire in the engine. Exploded. Second Zero tried to turn. Boynton anticipated. Led the target. The 50 caliber rounds walked through the cockpit. Pilots slumped. Aircraft dove into the ocean. Third Zero dove away. Boynton followed. The Corsair was faster in a dive. He closed the distance. Fired from dead astern. The Zero's tail section separated. The aircraft tumbled. Gone. Boynton pulled up. Scanned for more targets. The sky was clearing. The Japanese were running. January 3, 1944. Boynton led a fighter sweep over Rabaul. Simpson Harbor. The most heavily defended Japanese base in the Pacific. Hundreds of anti-aircraft guns. Dozens of fighters. Boynton spotted Japanese fighters taking off from Rapopo Airfield. He called the attack. Dove with his wingman Captain George Ashman. Boynton fired on a Zero climbing slowly. It exploded. His 26th victory. He attacked another. Shot it down. 27. He tied Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26. Actually, he'd passed it. Japanese fighters swarmed the Corsairs. Ashman's aircraft was hit. Started smoking. Boynton called for him to dive. Get out. Ashman's Corsair entered a shallow glide trailing black smoke. Japanese fighters poured fire into it. The Corsair went down. Ashman was killed. Boynton tried to protect his wingman. More Japanese fighters jumped him. His Corsair shuddered under cannon fire. 20mm rounds walked up the fuselage. The engine died. Oil pressure 0. Coolant temperature spiking. The propeller windmilled to a stop. Boynton glided toward the water. He ditched near the coast. Got out. Floated in his Mae West. A Japanese submarine surfaced. Picked him up. Boynton spent the rest of the war in a prisoner camp. The Navy listed him as killed in action. His family received notification. His mother got the telegram. Missing in action, presumed dead. In October 1945, President Truman awarded Boynton a posthumous Medal of Honor for his 28 victories and leadership of VMF 214. Weeks later, Boynton walked out of a Japanese prison camp. Alive. Skeletal. But alive. He'd survived 20 months as a POW. The Black Sheep Squadron flew 84 days of combat. Destroyed 97 enemy aircraft confirmed. Damaged dozens more. 9 pilots became aces. The squadron was disbanded in January 1944 after Boynton was shot down. By late 1944, the Corsair's role was expanding. Marines learned the bent-wing sledgehammer could carry bombs. Lots of bombs. The wings were strong. The engine had power to spare. In May 1944, Charles Lindbergh visited Marine squadrons in the Pacific. The famous aviator wanted to see combat. He flew missions with Marine pilots. On September 3, 1944, Lindbergh flew a Corsair carrying 3 1,000-pound bombs. He dropped them on Japanese positions at Ouachita. 5 days later, he dropped 1 2,000-pound bomb. Then on September 13th, he delivered 1 2,000-pound bomb and 2 1,000-pound bombs in a single sortie. 4,000 pounds of ordnance on a single-engine fighter. The Corsair became a fighter bomber. The bent-wing bird could haul massive bomb loads and still fight its way home. Marines added rockets. 8 high-velocity aircraft rockets under the wings. 5-inch diameter. 60 pounds each. The Corsair could deliver devastating firepower against ground targets. By early 1945, Corsairs were flying close air support missions supporting Marine infantry during island invasions. The Battle of Okinawa saw Corsairs attacking Japanese positions daily, dropping napalm, firing rockets, strafing with .50 caliber guns. The Marines called them Angels of Okinawa. The Corsairs provided critical air support during the bloodiest battle of the Pacific. The kamikaze threat changed everything. Japanese suicide pilots were attacking American ships. Carriers needed more fighters. Fast fighters that could intercept kamikazes before they reached the fleet. In December 1944, Marine Corsair squadrons deployed to Navy carriers. VMF 124 and VMF 213 joined USS Essex, the first Marine squadrons on a fleet carrier. The aircraft the Navy had rejected was now defending their ships. By war's end, dozens of Marine Corsair squadrons were flying from carriers. They intercepted kamikazes, shot down hundreds. The statistics told the story. By September 2, 1945, VJ Day, Corsair pilots had destroyed 2,140 enemy aircraft in aerial combat. The Marines and Navy lost 189 Corsairs to enemy aircraft, an 11-to-1 kill ratio, the lowest loss rate of any fighter in the Pacific War. Better than the Hellcat, better than the P-38, better than anything else in the sky. Corsairs flew 64,051 operational sorties, 54,470 from runways, 9,581 from carrier decks. The Corsair carried 70% of all bombs dropped by American fighters in the Pacific, over 15,000 tons, more than any other single-engine fighter. The bent-wing bird was both fighter and bomber, fast enough to kill Zeros, tough enough to survive ground fire, versatile enough to deliver massive bomb loads. 23 Marine aces scored 5 or more kills flying Corsairs. 24 Navy aces reached ace status in Corsairs. The Japanese called it whistling death. The distinctive sound of air rushing through the wing root oil coolers created a whistle. That sound meant Corsairs were diving, attacking. Death was coming. Japanese soldiers on the ground learned to fear that whistle. The war ended, but the Corsair kept fighting. Korea. June 1950. North Korean forces invaded South Korea. USS Valley Forge was the only American carrier in the Far East. On her deck were Corsairs, F4U 4BS. They flew ground attack missions on June 25, 1950. Close air support. The Corsair returned to war 5 years after World War II ended. Marine Corsair squadrons deployed to Korea. They flew from carriers. From land bases at Pohang and Pusan. They supported UN forces, attacked North Korean positions, destroyed tanks, bridges, supply lines. The bent-wing sledgehammer was still swinging. On September 10, 1952, Captain Jesse Falmer of VMF 312 was flying a combat air patrol mission near Pyongyang. He spotted a MiG-15 jet fighter at low altitude. The MiG was faster than the Corsair, more modern, built in the jet age. Falmer dove on it from above, used altitude and surprise. The MiG pilot never saw him. Falmer fired. The 650s hammered the MiG. The jet fighter caught fire and crashed. A propeller-driven Corsair from World War II had just killed a swept-wing jet fighter, the only such kill by a Marine in Korea. The Corsair served longer than any World War II fighter. Production continued until December 1952. The last aircraft rolled off the line in December. The French Navy received the last 94 F4U 7S. They flew them in Indochina against Viet Minh forces. In combat until 1954. Total production 12,571 aircraft from 1942 to 1952. 10 years of continuous production. No other American piston fighter matched that record. The aircraft the Navy rejected became a legend. The fighter deemed too dangerous for carriers dominated the Pacific. Marines made it theirs, learned its quirks, exploited its strengths. The long nose that blocked forward visibility, the heavy controls, the vicious stall, all became manageable with experience. The Corsair rewarded skilled pilots and punished the careless. Kenneth Walsh survived the war. 21 victories. Medal of Honor. 5 Distinguished Flying Crosses. He flew again in Korea. Transport missions. Retired as a lieutenant colonel in 1962. Died in 1998 at age 81. Pappy Boyington survived Japanese prison camps. Received his Medal of Honor from President Truman in 1945. The ceremony was anything but posthumous. Boyington walked up to receive it alive. Thin but alive. He became famous. A national hero. He struggled with alcohol after the war. Wrote his autobiography Ba Ba Black Sheep. Became a technical advisor for a television show loosely based on VMF 214. Died in 1988 at age 75. Buried at Arlington National Cemetery. The Corsair continued flying decades after World War II ended. Some air forces operated them into the 1960s. Honduras flew Corsairs in combat as late as 1969 during the football war against El Salvador. The last combat sortie by a Corsair came 26 years after the first. Today Corsairs fly at air shows. Dozens remain airworthy. The distinctive gull wing. The massive radial engine. The sound of that four-blade propeller. Aviation enthusiasts preserve them, restore them, keep them flying. A reminder of the aircraft that was too dangerous for carriers but perfect for Marines. The story of the Corsair is the story of adaptation and redemption. The Navy designed it for carriers, then rejected it as too dangerous. The Marines took it to war from land bases. Proved its worth in blood and victories. Forced the Navy to reconsider. By war's end, Corsairs were operating from both land and sea. Fighting kamikazes. Supporting invasions. Destroying enemy aircraft at a rate no other fighter could match. The aircraft killed inexperienced pilots during training. The Ensign Eliminator lived up to its name. But in the hands of skilled aviators it was lethal to the enemy. Firepower. Durability. The Corsair had everything except easy handling. It demanded respect. Rewarded competence. Punished error. From Guadalcanal to Okinawa. From the Solomons to Rabaul. From Korea to Indochina. The bent-wing sledgehammer fought wherever Marines needed air support. It destroyed over 2,140 enemy aircraft. Dropped thousands of tons of bombs. Flew tens of thousands of combat sorties. All from an aircraft the Navy said couldn't land on carriers. The Corsair proved them wrong, not through easy handling but through sheer performance. Fast enough to catch any enemy. Tough enough to survive battle damage. Armed enough to destroy whatever it caught. The Corsair didn't need to be easy. It needed to be effective. To us. The Marines took the Navy's reject and turned it into the most successful fighter of the Pacific War. They proved that the right pilots in the right hands could make any aircraft a weapon. The Corsair's 11-to-1 kill ratio stands as testament to Marine skill and the bent-wing bird's raw capability. An aircraft born from a quest for speed became legendary through the courage of the men who flew it. If you want more forgotten stories from World War II, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us which story you want to hear next.